Aston Villa 2, West Ham 1. Frustrating that we didn't get managed to go through in the third round of the FA Cup, but I would say there's plenty of positives to take under that performance for Graham Potter, definitely. I think we looked the most structured or most coherent we have done throughout this entire season. And he's been here one day, and there's a clear idea and intent behind what Potter's trying to do. Of course, there was going to be mistakes. Of course, there was going to be issues and flaws because he's been there one day. But that first half where Villa didn't even have one shot on goal, that showed a lot of positives behind this West Ham team. In the second half, we'll get into, but I think there's definitely positives to take from this overall. Again, frustrating that we've gone out of the cup, but looking back at the game is very, very clear. Even with one day on the training ground, Potter's been able to implement some of his style on this squad already. And, you know, as they learn, as they develop, it's going to get stronger, and hopefully we'll be able to back Potter in the transfer window as well. But yeah, we've got a couple of injuries as well in this game, which were frustrating. But let's look at how things lined up to start with before we get into the analysis. This wasn't the shape, so ignore this. But Fabianski in goal, Wan-Bissaka, Mavropanos, Kilman, Skulls, Souček, Alvarez, Paqueta, Somerville, Kudus, Fulkrug. So pretty much full strength from West Ham. It was good to see Ollie Skulls be given a chance as well. And Villa's lineup, you can see there, was pretty strong. They had a few rotations, but by and large, it was pretty strong. This was the game state, so you can see their momentum. The claret is being Aston Villa. Definitely a different picture in the second half. First half, obviously, we were definitely edging the early exchanges, and we looked really, really promising, but kind of fizzled out a little bit. And then on the right-hand side there, 59% possession to 41 for West Ham. 2 XG for Villa compared to our 0.77, 16 shots to our 11, 5 on target to our 2, 3 big chances created to our 0, 1 big chance missed for Villa, 0 for us, of course. A lot more passes for Villa, more corners, and more fouls committed. But I think people were just intrigued to see, including myself, who was at the ground, how Aston Villa were going to line up and how West Ham were going to line up, and how Potter, more specifically, was going to adapt his style or implement his style from this first opening game. And it was very, very clear to see the indications early on of how we wanted to structure the game going on. But I think everyone was so taken aback by the start that we made. We looked really, really good. And that opening goal we got within the first 9 minutes, I just want to take it through because you can already see Graham Potter's philosophy and, you know, strategy implemented here for this goal. So I just want to highlight that as well and take you through the goal because it's really interesting to see. And yeah, it started really, really well. We were confident. We were positive. This is how things started. So what you'll see with Potter's formations as we go on through these previews and review shows that we do, he plays a back three. He plays a midfield pivot of a 2, and he uses, in this build-up, he'll use the goalkeeper almost to be that back 4. So take away that back 3 shape. You can see Fabianski is almost making that back 4. And that's exactly what Potter wants to do. And he has his wing backs that aren't in shot here. So Somerville was right wing back. Skulls was left wing back. You've got Alvarez and Souček in the middle of the park as the pivot. And you've got Paqueta just drifting into that space between Leon Bailey and Kamara there. So if I just move it on a frame here when Kilman receives the ball, we've still got that structure. Skulls, you can see there, is dropping in a little bit from left wing back. And this is almost created because Aston Villa, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players really high up the pitch. The rest of them are on the halfway line. And that's where Potter's shape and system will come into effect. And we're going to see the best out of the likes of Kudus, Paqueta, Bowen, Somerville in this formation. Fulkrug does really, really well. He did fantastically well yesterday until he came off. It was a real shame about his injury, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But he wins this initial header on. And then what you've got is Paqueta and Kudus either side of him, almost playing as advanced 10s either side. And then Somerville almost acting as a right winger, even though he's playing that traditional wing-back system. And it just creates overloads where we can. And although Villa have, 5 on 4 here, we're able to move the ball really, really quickly with our pace. And lovely pass through to Somerville. If I just progress it here. And we get bodies in the box. And there you can see Kudus and Paqueta's positions for West Ham. That's how you're going to see them probably for the rest of the season if they continue in these positions, or whoever plays in these positions. That's where we're going to see bodies getting forwards. And yeah, Fulkrug occupies the centre. Somerville does really, really well. Picks out Paqueta with a fantastic pass, and Paqueta scores a fantastic goal. And he almost scored before this, but it was a really nice move. Back to front, worked well, bouncing off the striker in Fulkrug, using bodies to get forwards with pace. And then clinical finishing is something we haven't been used to seeing at West Ham. And again, Graham Potter had one training session going into this match. No way can you judge him off of the end result and what went on after this. But the early signs are there that things look like, again, probably the most structured we've seen this season, including Julian Lopetegui's reign. And you'll be able to see it very, very clearly here. So this is what you'll see from Graham Potter's teams for West Ham moving forwards. And it's something we will have advantages of. There will obviously be disadvantages to this, but I think predominantly it's going to make us a lot more structured and a lot more settled, and we're going to create more opportunities and be more defensively solid. So you can see the back three in shot there. And what you see is that box four midfield. So you've got two double pivots in Alvarez and Souček. And as I mentioned, Kudus and Paqueta picking up those pockets or number 10 spaces. And that's what Potter will want to do. He'll want to form that box four. And then you've got Fulkrug as the main point of striker. And then I've circled the wing backs in Skiles and Somerville, who provide that width provide that overlapping fullbacks role, and just allow a little bit more width and expansion into our play. But that's what allows the pockets of Kudus and Paqueta. And you almost then have a front five if Skiles is going forwards as well. But you have a back five that is pretty solid because you've got Alvarez and Souček, and then you've got a back three that stays pretty solid as well. But overall, to see that 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes into a game away at Aston Villa in the FA Cup when you've had one training session, we should be extremely, extremely encouraged by that opening passage of play and the fact that we were managed to even go ahead in this game. I think it was fantastic. As I mentioned, as the first half progressed, I thought we were defensively excellent. I mentioned it on the TikTok. You can go check that out from the matchday vlog that I did. But I thought we were fantastic defensively. We really shut out the kind of central spaces. And what you're going to see with Potter is he will allow you to go wide. He wants to force you away from the goal, which is why we play that box four midfield to try and nullify the spaces in between the lines. Again, we'll get into the second half where there's still weaknesses and the players are going to have to learn how to do it. But the idea is to keep people away from the goal as best as possible. And forcing them into wide areas does that. I think, again, because it's been one game, the players still need to adapt how to do that. I think there were times where we were a little bit too naive and allowed a little bit too much space in those wide areas. But the idea was there, which I liked. I think the players were kind of taking on board what the instructions were from Potter, and they were trying their best to execute it. But yeah, as the game progressed, I think the injury to Fulkrug, I think the injury to Somerville really killed us, because those two players in the first half were integral to how we wanted to play. And they were fantastic. They were performing really, really well. Fulkrug was winning his duels and his battles. He was making it really difficult for the Aston Villa centre-backs to mark him. And Somerville was just providing a constant outlet on that right-hand side. And yeah, really overlapping with Kudus. They were linking up really nicely. And then you had Wan-Bissaka just sitting in behind, and it just felt so much nicer. And yeah, Aston Villa really, really struggled. Only 0 shots in that first half is testament to how we defended and how we set up. And yeah, obviously there's going to be things we need to improve on. And to be honest, Aston Villa didn't move the ball quick enough. They kind of played into our hands a bit. I think they didn't know what to expect from West Ham, so they were trying to figure us out. But as the game went on in the second half, that kind of changed. And I think one of the big reasons for that, as I mentioned, was the injuries, fatigue, and also just a lack of understanding at this point. So if we just move it forwards here, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So when we talk about Graham Potter and what I said about those central zones and closing off those central zones, this is in the 68th minute, and you can see just how central and how compact we want to be. However, when you kind of look at this in isolation, yes, we've got loads of bodies compact, but we've got everyone behind the ball here. This is all 10 players for West Ham. And we just got fatigued. We just started to be pushed back a little bit by Aston Villa. And this actually resulted in a shot from Maatsen from long distance that Fabianski saved. But you can see here that we were just dropping off. The shape was coming a little bit less compact, a little bit less structured, sorry. Players were being pulled out of position. You can see Danny Ings there on the edge of the box. Kudus is a little bit further up. Paqueta's out high and wide. So we were just starting to lose that rhythm and structure and belief, I think, at this point, because Aston Villa were piling on the pressure. And yeah, look, inevitably they were going to come on strong. They made some subs. They were going for it. And yeah, we were just naturally getting fatigued. And I just think in the second half, we were really, really poor in possession of the ball. And that's been the highlight this season. Individuals haven't been good enough. And I'm going to point some out because it wasn't good enough. Danny Ings, that performance was shocking. The effort, the application, the attitude was night and day between Fulkrug and Ings. They're not the same striker. We're not saying to Danny Ings to win every flick on and header, but the effort and application was missing. And he just wasn't good enough. He did not play well enough. He was pretty anonymous for the entire game. Mavropanos, again, just individual mistakes. We're going to keep seeing that time and time again at West Ham for Mavropanos. And Edson Alvarez, not good enough in that midfield, just really slow on the ball. Second half, he was being pulled way out of position. He was doing what he normally does, where he chases the ball and just leaves us so exposed in that midfield. You can't do that. You can't do that in the Premier League or in the FA Cup against a team like Aston Villa, because you're just going to get punished. And there were times where Alvarez was just running out of position and then just knackering himself and then trying to get back into a shape. And that kind of reflected on the entire team, because once one person starts getting fatigued, you're making other people work harder, and then they're going to get fatigued, and it has that knock-on effect. And that's what started to happen. Even someone like Kudus, first half, excellent. Second half, anonymous. Paqueta, first half, excellent. Second half, pretty poor, but one of the better players that we saw. But I just think we had a lack of care for the ball. And I think it was because we were defending that 1-0 lead, and we had this mindset of, right, we can hold on here. We've got, 20 minutes left of this game. We're still 1-0 up. We can maybe go through in the fourth round here and get off to a start under winning start under Graham Potter. But yeah, it is what it is. And what's even more frustrating is how the goal came about for Aston Villa, how they got that leveler, because yeah, I think everyone's seen it in the stadium. It looks absolutely clear that no one touched it. Onana's shot goes wide. No one's really bothered about it. And you can see here in this second frame, look, West Ham are ready to reset. Tyrone Mings is jogging back in. The Aston Villa players have turned around and going backwards. Onana's not appealed, and the ref just decides to give a corner. It's just absolutely incompetent. And obviously you can't VAR that sort of thing, even if there was VAR in play, which there wasn't. But how can you get that wrong when you're so close? I mean, if we just take it back here, just so you can see how close the ref is, he's got a very clear view of this whole play. So how on earth he's give that as a corner? And when something like that happens, you start to get a feeling of, okay, maybe something's going to happen from this. But look, we don't defend it well enough. And again, there's some more controversy around what happens after this. But let's take it forwards to the actual corner. So you can see Aston Villa, Concer's at the back post. Everyone's kind of gone near post for Aston Villa to create that space and try and get the flick on. And Concer's with Paqueta at the back post. Let's move it forwards here. Paqueta's now on the floor. You can see Tyrone Mings has won the flick on at the front post, so it goes back post now. So we haven't dealt with the initial ball well enough, but it's a good flick on from Mings. Really difficult one to defend that. And then Concer's just free because of what's happened with Paqueta. And this entire sequence, again, we don't have VAR. This entire sequence, the ref is not looking on that left-hand side. So it should really be on the linesmen as to identify this has happened. Again, it's the other side of the pitch and there's a lot of bodies, so it's difficult, but the ref has to have a view of the entire thing. He can't just be focused on where the ball is going to be going. And we move it forwards here. The ball actually went to Konsa. He picked it up, passed it to Maatsen. And then you can see Paqueta still on the ground here. Maatsen takes a shot through a body of players. And it just is really fortunate how it happens. Fabianski goes to save it. Souček gets a touch on it before Fabianski can save it. Then it goes into Fabianski. So Souček plays it into Fabianski. It ricochets into the path of Onana, who I've circled in the center of the box there, who's on his toes. And he's there just to poke in front of Wan-Bissaka. If I'm being hypercritical, could Wan-Bissaka have got there potentially? But it's a very difficult one. I'm not going to blame Wan-Bissaka for that because of how quick it happened. And yeah, just really lucky ricochet for Villa to get to it. But here you can see the very, very clear contact from Konsa. Paqueta's kind of like shutting him off at the back post, keeping an eye on him. Konsa tries to go around him, as you can see here. But in doing so, he swings an arm and does hit Paqueta in the face. Does Paqueta make a meal of it on the floor? Absolutely. Is it a foul? Yes. He's gained an advantage from fouling someone. It's definitely a foul. And it's frustrating that, again, we didn't have VAR in this to overrule it. Not sure they would have anyway. But the ref wasn't even looking at that passage of play and he's just focused on the ball. It's really frustrating. And yeah, at that point, the pressure was becoming pretty insurmountable from Villa. I think we were, as I mentioned, we were dropping deeper. We were trying to stay compact, but we weren't good enough in possession. We weren't offering a threat the other way, really. We didn't have many moments or attacks just because of how many injuries and how many adjustments we'd made. And yeah, we just lost our attacking threat and we just really suffered on the ball as a consequence of that. And once Villa got that equalizer, things changed. The Villa fans started singing, and you could start to see a shift in momentum a little bit for West Ham. And yeah, we just became really, really fatigued. Again, individual mistakes continue to happen. And the second goal kind of epitomizes the fact that you cannot judge Graham Potter's performance on one game or one training session, because the players themselves will still have flaws in the system. The players themselves will still not understand the full consequences of their actions if they're not stuck to the structure that should be. And that's exactly what happens for the Villa second goal. So right here, you can see that box four midfield slightly. So you've got Kudus and Paqueta in their natural positions, Danny Ings striker, Alvarez and Souček. They're pretty close up, pretty high up. But I just want to point your attention to a couple of things. So Buendia at the top left, he's picked up that space just off the blind eye of Souček and Alvarez. So he's just picked up that space between the defence and midfield. So again, the spaces between that defence and midfield are way too big here. Kufal's drawn in to this player here in the centre. He was doing that in a lot in this half, where he was going kind of man for man and touch tight. But what it was doing was leaving our back three a little bit too exposed. And then because Wan-Bissaka's so pretty high up as well, it just leaves that space there. And once Tielemans turns, he plays a really nice pass through, but it's too late for Souček. Before he can realise that Buendia is behind him, he's already gone. And Tielemans just plays that ball through. But at this point, Kufal should recognise the danger of the situation and drop back into the back three, because that's where he's playing. He's playing in a back three right now, not as a wing back. He's one of those right centre backs, so he should be making that back three, which we'll show at the end. But as the ball progresses, Buendia picks up the ball, and there you can see. So Kufal's position should be where Ollie Watkins is running into. And then you've got Mavropanos and Kilman. Ollie Scholes is trying to tuck in as the left wing back there. But Kufal's just left that space completely exposed. And because Wan-Bissaka's high up as well, he can't recover in time. So for me, that's Kufal not understanding the situation. And he should have dropped back in there. He shouldn't have continued on to Jacob Ramsey. The ball gets played forwards. And then again, I think we've seen this a few times with Kilman this season. For as good as he has been, he does have a tendency to get caught on flat-footed on his heels in these situations. Mavropanos, again, I wouldn't trust him to not win this duel. To win this duel, to be honest, I've seen it enough times where players get past him. It's pretty obvious what Ollie Watkins is going to do. He's going to go onto that left side and push it across the centre of the box. But you can see there Morgan Rogers just drifting into that space. Again, too easy for Mavropanos, for Watkins to get past him. And then you can see there in the center of your screen what Kilman's doing. He's very flat-footed. Rogers is moving onto the ball. And then as you can see here, he gets the toe in front and he just wants it more. He's just ready and anticipating it more. And Kilman can't get there because he's not quick enough and he's not alert to that situation. Whether there's a lack of communication from Scholes there to say that Rogers is coming, whether there's a lack of awareness from Kilman, he hasn't, scanned and looked to see what danger's coming in. That remains to be seen. But from an individual perspective, it wasn't good enough from Kilman. It wasn't good enough from Mavropanos. And to be honest, Kufal at the start and how we were playing with Souček and Alvarez, that's where it kind of started, allowing Buendia to drift into that space. So, as I mentioned, there's going to be flaws to this system early on. Once the players start to understand it more, hopefully these will be eradicated. But you can see here, that's the Danny Ings at the focal point at the top right. You've got Kudus and Paqueta as your kind of advanced 10s. I've circled the wing backs in Scholes and Wan-Bissaka and the midfield pivot of Alvarez and Souček. And there's your back three. Look, Kufal, Mavropanos and Kilman. And the more Kufal gets drawn in, that leaves the space. And it's one pass through the center of the pitch, which is way too easy. And yeah, as I mentioned, Souček just allowed him to run off that blind spot a little bit. And then, yeah, because Kufal's continued to go into Jacob Ramsey, the space is there and he can't recover in time. So, look, we lost 2-1. We're out of the FA Cup, which is frustrating. It probably would have been nice to have a cup competition to keep going in because of, the league's pretty much done for West Ham other than staying up. And it would have given Potter more games to, implement his style and, test players. But I think there were definitely positives to take. I think from that first goal that we scored in those opening exchanges, you can already see, as I mentioned at the start, this is the most structured West Ham team we've seen in a long time. We didn't see it under Lopetegui. We were consistently questioning on these review shows what was actually happening, what was the idea, what was the intent. With Graham Potter, it's very, very evident early on what he wants to do. Whether it's going to be successful or not, that's a different question. But at least we have an identity to an extent, and we're trying to play a certain way. And again, players are going to have to get adapted. We're still missing key players. You know, Tadibo and Bowen weren't even in the squad. Fulcrook and Somerville going off is massive. You know, there's still players in this team that are going to be integral to how Potter wants to play. And if we're going to continue to build on that success. But look, I'm going to take the positives from this game. As frustrating as it was, driving back from Aston Villa late at night, having been very, very close to going through, that's a different thing. But I think overall we have to be positive about what we've seen from Graham Potter. Again, individual mistakes weren't good enough. On the ball, we weren't good enough in the second half. I think we got fatigued as the game went on because the players did put in a shift. But now the attention turns back to the Premier League in a really important game. For me, I just wanted to maybe shout out a couple of players. So I think Ollie Scholes definitely deserves credit for his performance. I thought he was fantastic. There were a couple of times where he got caught out or squared up to the ball with those over-the-top through balls. But by and large, he won a lot of his duels. He was fantastic. He was good going forwards. He provided an outlet. He was very comfortable in possession of the ball. And for someone that's so young and hasn't played much first-team football for West Ham, he looked like he's got it. He's got it. He's got the minerals for this type of Premier League performances or FA Cup performances. So, yeah, Ollie Scholes definitely one of the standouts for me. And as I mentioned, Fulcrook and Somerville were fantastic before they came off as well. Lucas Paqueta was much better in the first half. Second half, I think it just faded off a little bit. And yeah, I just think we're going to start to see the better out of some of these players as time goes on. But look, Aston Villa go through 2-1. Frustrating that we didn't go through, but again, we take the positives. We move on to Fulham on Tuesday night in the Premier League as well, and it'll be interesting to see how Potter does that, if any players recover in time for that game, because we have got a lot of injuries now. So yeah, it's not easy for Graham Potter. I think we're probably going to be looking in the transfer window sooner rather than later to try and mask over some of those injuries and bring in some replacements, but time will tell with that. And whether it's actually players Potter wants, that's a different question. But yeah, if you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts were on Graham Potter's first game in charge at West Ham. Despite the defeat, were there positives that you're taking from it? Or were there things that you're thinking, maybe I don't like that? That's going to have to change going forwards. Let me know. I will respond to your comments down below as well. And yeah, that's going to be all for today. Leave a like, subscribe, and one thing left to say, come on, you Irons.